Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a really stacked show for you today. A lot of guests. Brianna, who are they?
Well, Teslin Figueroa will join us to discuss how independent voters may influence midterm results. Plus, we'll talk with North Carolina's Green Party candidate for U.S. Senate, Matthew Hoh, about his third-party campaign. But first, President Biden spoke at Washington's D.C. Union Station last night at one of his final pitches to midterm voters, again about the threat to democracy posed by, quote, ultra MAGA Republicans. Let's watch some of that.
There are candidates running for every level of office in America, for governor, Congress, Attorney General, Secretary of State, who won't commit. They will not commit to accepting the results of elections that they're running in. This is a path to chaos in America. It's unprecedented, it's unlawful, and it's un-American.
Ahead of the president's speech, Fox News' Peter Doocy pressed White House Secretary Press Secretary Jean-Pierre, on the president's offensive against the GOP. Let's watch some of that.
Thank you, Karine. Following up on your comment that there's an alarming number of Republicans who are saying they're not going to accept election results. Does that mean President Biden thinks it is a threat to democracy if somebody votes Republican?
No, that's a ridiculous question. No.
Why is that a ridiculous question?
Because American people should have their right to vote for whomever they want. The voting is a sacred right. It is something that the president wants to protect at every turn, and he has done that. He's taken actions to protect the right to vote. And you see Democrats in Congress also doing the work to protect the right to vote.
Noticeably absent from the president's speech last night was any mention of the economy. This even after the Fed raised interest rates by another 75 basis points for the fourth time this year. So the speech, the venue choice for the speech was very interesting. Union Station, I used to live right around the corner from Union Station and fled the area after it was overtaken by encampments of homeless people during the pandemic. The station itself is a beautiful building that used to would be a bustling mall with lots of here's a photo of it from the outside. Used to be this bustling mall with lots of shops. Many of them have closed. I think the vast majority of them have closed due to pandemic. They did not rebound after the pandemic. There was a crime problem there. There was a Starbucks there. The Starbucks pulled out of Union Station. They said the reason they cited was that their customers and employees were being harassed by mentally unwell vagrants. So this would be a good venue for a speech about the economy, about what Biden is doing to get us back on track. And it said it was kind of monomaniacally focused on this election stuff, which is not that the election stuff isn't important. I get it. I also detest what many Republicans have said about elections, et cetera. But look, the people care about the economy. They care about making ends meet, affording food, et cetera. And this is a really, I mean, who cares? It's a train station in Washington, D.C. But it really is kind of an example of life not having rebounded since the pandemic in some senses for some sectors, for some people.
Yeah, look, I don't think it's a who cares at all. I remember when the Union Station was a very different place. My parents who met at Howard had their first date in the American restaurant that used to be in the middle of the main area on the platform that's been taken down a long time ago. And there have been a lot of, I think, changes in a declining way at Union Station, even since long before the pandemic.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
But that's not an excuse. I think that is absolutely right that it is shameful that people who come into our nation's capital see how poorly we've treated so many people in our who are mentally ill and poor and who have congregated around that area. It should be embarrassing for the richest country in the history of the world to have this problem that's so easily addressed and to let it fester. Not obviously, there's a moral component here, but even just in a superficial, public embarrassment perspective, you would think that there would be an investment in taking care of the human beings that are living there, and there isn't. So I do think, more to the point, it is a disaster for Joe Biden to continue to make this weirdly kind of administrative argument about democracy when people have these substantive economic concerns.
It's so tone deaf. It comes a point where it's very tone deaf. Not saying he's wrong about it, but to make that the focus, who in the White House says, let's fit an extra speech in by Biden here. We've got a week to go before midterms. topics, ideas. So,
Our democracy.
right. It's like that cartoon where like two people have bad ideas, one person has a good idea, and you throw them out the window or something. You know that one?
I don't. Look,
no, I'm not gonna find it.
Even Democrats I saw online were responding to this saying, this isn't a good look. Who is this exactly for? I mean, really, that should be the question that's front and center on your mind when you start to sit down and write a speech. What are the constituency groups that you feel like you haven't reached yet? Who are the people who aren't already coming out to vote? And Biden and the administration seem to think that what is going to galvanize people to the polls is this idea that Republicans pose a threat to the democratic process, which there has been a demonstrated series of actions that make it
all the
clear
voters who care about that are already voting Democrat.
All those people are already voting,
Yeah.
and people have other substantive things on their minds that are just getting ignored.
Yeah, the people who are unsure, who are undecided, maybe there's not that many of them, but they are going to decide these super close elections. And I don't think that's what they want to hear about.
Yeah, it's almost insulting, frankly, to not be talking about the substantive issues.
In a new opinion piece for the Washington Post, columnist George Will argues that for the good of the country, President Biden and Vice President Harris should not seek a second term. George Will writes, quote, Biden is not just past his prime, even adequacy is in his past. And this is Harris's prime. In 2024, the Republican Party might present the nation with a presidential nominee whose unfitness has bbeen demonstrated. After next Tuesday's sobering election results, Democrats should resolve not to insult and imperil the nation by doing likewise. I mean, these are not very exciting political figures, clearly, but as we keep coming back to who else is there?
Yeah, it's worse than not being exciting. Not being exciting is Amy Klobuchar. What's going on with Joe Biden is a little bit of something different. He is past his prime, and this interesting little shade there that Kamala is in her prime and still an unsatisfactory candidate is also true. She has never drawn votes at any point in her national political career. It's never been the case. She had to drop out of the Democratic primary before her home state because Andrew Yang, someone who was relatively unknown a year before those primaries, was polling higher than her in her home state, where she was a senator in California with all of the name recognition and benefits in the world. Adding her to the ticket was a mistake. Biden thought that somehow did something for Black Americans. He obviously leaned on that, thinking that, I don't basically have to give anything substantive to Black Americans, like following through my campaign promises on the $2,000 checks, the student debt cancellation, or the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. If Kamala's there, he has been running his administration under that premise. But look, Black voters are leaving the Democratic Party. They're struggling to get Black male voters in particular to turn out in Georgia. But Kamala has attracted a couple of AKAs, people who are in her sorority, who have pride in more bourgeois Black people like Kamala Harris. That is a very small percentage of the country that you have appealed, putting her on the ticket. And you could have been trading somebody up who had a chance to have a real future in the Democratic Party.
And he was put in the position of essentially had to pick someone who checked various boxes, who was a woman or minority or both.
Well, he put that on himself.
Well, but he was pressured to do so, right? By the thrust of the questioning and the debates from the media.
Brie never committed to that, and he got in trouble for it.
Yeah.
I think he committed to maybe it probably will be a woman.
Yes.
But he didn't commit on a racial basis.
I think he said like in all likely.
But boxing.
No, he did say it differently than Biden. He said, I'm going to pick. He essentially said, I'm going to pick the person who ideologically is most qualified to be my running mate, and in that pool of people, there are plenty of women, so I will choose one of them, but not that I would avoid that to choose a woman.
And Biden saying that, by the way,
different than what Biden said.
It was. I don't think it was meaningfully different because also the way that Biden framed it, it didn't look good for Kamala. It made her seem like a pick that wasn't at all substantive and that was purely driven by identity. And the fact that she hasn't exactly risen to the occasion, it's not a good look. It's not a good look.
All right, well, I'm looking forward to your radar, Brie. That will be next. Stay with us.